Welcome to Waypoint Connect. It's so great that you guys have joined us for this episode. Alta, welcome to Waypoint Connect.
Thank you.
So Alta, you actually need an introduction. People know you, but in front of a camera, people don't know you. So maybe tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Alta and I'm part of the Waypoint team and I'm married to Francois and we have a boy called Samuel and he's in grade 7 now and he makes his mommy proud every day.
So now that we're sitting in January, what I've discovered personally and from what people have shared with me is that usually for families especially, they're under financial pressure because Christmas is just played out, and no matter how hard you try, you overspend, even if it's slightly, but you overspend on what you've budgeted.
Yeah.
But then January comes, kids need to go to school uniforms, shoes are now not fitting anymore if you've got teenagers. So you've got all of those expenses, and that just creates that climate of financial pressure. So our topic for today is finances.
Yeah.
And I know you've journeyed with that, and that's been something that you had to come to a new realization around finances and God's provision. Do you maybe want to give us a backstory to how that point played out in your life?
Yeah, it's actually a very long story. I think the first struggles I had with finances or my family was when I grew up. So my mom and dad were in a space, there was a space in my life where the income in the house was very limited and we had to do like really extreme stuff like hawking ginger beer. I can remember when I was like in grade 6 that my dad made ginger beer and we had to walk from one house to another selling ginger beer and just to have food on the table. So finances was always like a theme and a struggle in our household to put ends meat on the table. And I remember I was way in high school. There's a lot of stories and testimonies I can give you, but two of the testimonies that I think really stood out for me was like, we will have bills to pay and stuff to do, and then we'll know there was like not enough money for everything. And then the afternoon if we get home from school, somebody would have put packages in front of our house and or envelope with money in the post box, and then it would cover everything that we needed. So God took care of us from a very always that I could remember. God was the one taking care of us and providing for our every need that we needed. And my mom and dad example of how to handle this was not going and gamble or drink or buy cigarettes. It was about going on their knees and submit to God and trust in Him.
And I think the main thing that we need to keep in mind is, you mentioned it, is the fact that God provides. And often we can move into a space where we think, I'm successful, I'm doing well, and I'm providing. And I think that would be the worst space to be in, to think that you can provide. And lockdown for a lot of people have just reminded them about the fact that you're not actually providing because you're not in control.
Yeah.
What you have really is a gift from God, and you're simply stewarding what He's entrusted to you.
Yeah. On the end, it's only God that can provide, and it's only our victory, our finances doesn't lie in what our bank balance tells us or what we have. It's all about getting to a space where you realize who God is and who's God for you, and that He's the one providing and taking care of you.
And what happened in your life where you realized that?
Yeah, so it was quite a journey. In 2013, middle 2013, I was in a place where my contract had ended at the current job where I was at. And it was about 6 months till I had to find a new job or a new place to work and to have an income. And I just knew that God still calls me into ministry. So I didn't want to go into a secular work environment. I still wanted to be full-time in ministry and didn't know how that's going to play out. Just had God's promise that He will take care. And and I just followed Him. But suddenly everything in my life started to become this thing about finances. So when I started in January the next year in ministry again, and God already started to provide for what we need. Then it wasn't. I was in a space where everything I prayed about was about our finances. Everything I talked about was about our finances. Every testimony I gave was about our finances. So it was like, I will be praying for something, and then God will provide, and then I will tell everybody how amazing God provided. And one of the amazing stories, I just want to share this one, because there's a lot of testimonies that I can tell you. My dad once said, just quickly want to say this, I caught him in his office one day, and he was like very down. And I walked in on him and I said to him, but Dad, why are you worrying? You know that God will provide. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, I know. I'm just wondering how he's going to do it this time. So it's never a question of will God provide. It's just sometimes we wonder how is he going to provide this time. And so the one time I wanted to go on a women's camp in 2015, and I knew I had to be there, but I needed like $500 to get there. So it was the week before, and I know I had like 36 cupcakes in the freezer. And I said to God, okay, well, if I can sell those 36 cupcakes for 10 Rand each, I will have like 360 Rand, and that will cover some of it, but then I don't know what you're going to do to provide for the rest. So we're on our way with friends of mine to Utenake to go and see Jacques Milan and the Father's Voice team. They had a thing there. And I was sitting in the crowd looking at them. God said to me, you know that 36 cupcakes in your freezer, you have to give it to them. And I said, well, God, really?
Yeah, I've got another plan for those 36 cupcakes.
Yeah, those 36 cupcakes.
I know where they're going, and they're not going there.
They're going to camp. We're going to camp with those 36 cupcakes. So I was sitting there and I was thinking, God, you're asking a lot now, because I don't know how I'm going to get to camp, but I know I have to go to this camp.
And in essence, what you're saying is, you like that little boy with the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, I've got this, but this is all I have.
And it's still not enough.
If I give it to you, what will I have for lunch?
And it will still be not enough. So, obedient as I am, always when God calls me to do something like this, I walked up to the guys and I said to them, I'm going on a camp this weekend, but I have 36 cupcakes in my freezer that belongs to you. So when you go on Saturday morning, just stop at my house and just pick it up, because those 36 cupcakes are yours to take to Cape Town. And they were like blown away and so happy. And so I get back into the car, and the guy driving the car, he turned around and he gave me his hand, and he's like, God said to me, I have to give this to you. And I was looking at him and I took it, and when I took it, it was 500 Rand. And I was like, no freaking way. And I told him what happened in the service while we were in the service, and he just said, God just convinced him in his heart that this 500 Rand needs to go to you. And so yeah, needless to say, on that camp I was actually baptized, so I needed to be there.
Yeah,
so
that's the camp for you.
Yeah.
And what I love about your story, which is exactly the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, is if you held on to those cupcakes, it would have been 360 Rand, and you still would have been short.
Yeah.
But because it didn't make sense, but you knew God was saying, and you trusted God, and you gave away,
Yeah.
He gave you the 500 Rand that you needed.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have happened if you weren't obedient.
And this is the thing that I was thinking about later on in life.
Yeah, because the question is, what is God actually saying to us through this?
Yeah.
What was the process that He was working with you in, and the realization that He brought you to?
The realization was later on that my whole life just went about finances. Every time I prayed, it was about finances. Every time I testified, was about finances. So being in that space, so consumed about how God is going to provide for us next, I totally lost the plot in what God really called me to, and why He has died for me, and I lost the plot of the you beside you. So I was so focused on the next testimony, the next big thing that God's going to do for me, that I totally didn't see that God actually wants to use me for something else. And as long as the enemy keeps me there, focusing on what's next, the next testimony, the next thing that God's going to provide. And it sounds great because there's a lot of amazing testimonies I can tell you like this. And it's awesome and it's honorable and God provided in every need already then. But He couldn't use me for anything else.
Yeah.
Because I was
You
so
were
stuck
you were
in
limiting God.
I was limiting Him. He couldn't use me to speak into other people's life at all. I couldn't have any other testimony because it was just that. Because I was still not in a space where I trust Him, really trust Him for my bank balance and for what I need, because I was so focused. And Matthew 6 verse 31 to 33, that says that seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and He will give everything else to you. So the one morning, I was preparing lunchbox for Samuel for school, and I was making his sandwich, and just felt like God's asking me, so what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm making a sandwich for Samuel. He's like, oh, that's interesting. So why are you doing it? I'm like, I'm his mother. He's going to be hungry, but break time, I need to give him like something to eat. And it's like, oh, did he ask you to do that? And I'm like, no. It's like, so why are you doing it? I'm like, I'm his mother. I'm going to do it anyway. Even if he doesn't ask me, I'm going to provide for him. And I just felt God said, oh, that's interesting. So why are you bugging me the whole time about providing you where I'm going to do it anyway? You're my daughter. I'm going to provide for you even if you don't ask. So you don't have to ask me anymore. You can just seek my kingdom and seek my righteousness, and all the rest will just come to you. And that's why I think where the penny dropped for me, to realize that God just so loves us. He's really our Father, and He's not like the earthly father that has the limits to His finances, that not always provide where you need Him to provide. But He's the God, and everything belongs to Him, and He loves us even more than our earthly dad could ever. And so I didn't need to focus on how He's going to provide for me next. I only need to focus on how can He use me next in other people's lives to bring the light into the darkness. And I think that penny dropped for me that morning when I was making those sandwiches. And I'm like, and then afterwards, as your focus shifts from finances to other things, I caught myself times where I feel like, oh, my I don't have money in my purse or my bank account, but look at all the food in my cupboard. So we set for a week or two at least, and then as the food will grow lower in the cupboards, I see about the money in my bank account has increased, so I have money to go and buy more. So, and that's been the story of this past 7 years for me, is to get to that space where also realizing that it's not, sometimes we get stuck to the last part of the verse and we call God out on that. But you said you will provide in our every need. But we forget the first part where God said, seek the kingdom, stay righteous, live in my righteousness. And if we in that space where we are not seeking His kingdom and where we are not living righteous, we're taking ourselves out of the household of God, where He can't provide for us and we can't take care of us if we are not living in. It's like if Samuel moves out one day, I'm not going to go to his house and fill his cupboards with food and wash his dishes and do his washing. He needs to take care of himself. But as long as he lives under my roof, I can take care of him and I can love him and I can protect him and I can give him all that he needs. But if he removes himself from that, he removes himself from that space of taking care of. And that's the same as what I experience from God, is when we live in that space of His presence and seeking His kingdom and His righteousness, then we don't need to worry about what we're going to eat or drink, or because that's the promise. Then it just happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're in a space where finances are tight for you at the moment and you feel that you're stuck and you know where to turn, know that God is there for you. God knows what your need is, but He wants us to bring His need to us. But like Alta shared just now as well, the conversation can't be about finances the whole time, and we can't just turn to God when it's about finances. God is about an intimate relationship with us, and out of that flows God's love and God's caring. So we shouldn't approach it from the other way around, and we selling ourselves short by doing that. So this season that you're in, press through it, trust God, reconnect with God, and seek the Father's heart of God.
Thank you.
And remember, have a great week.